Inefficiency by Jack London. I'd rather die on the high road under the open blue, I'd rather starve to death in the sweet air, or drown in the brave, salt sea, or have one fierce glad hour of battle, and then a bullet, than lead the life of a brute in a stinking hell, and gasp out my broken breath, at last on a pauper's pallet. Robert Blatchford. I stopped a moment to listen to an argument on the Mile End Waste. It was night time, and they were all workmen of a better class. They had surrounded one of their number, a pleasant-faced man of 30, and were giving it to him rather heatedly. "But how about this cheap immigration?" one of them demanded. "The Jews of Whitechapel say, cutting our throats right along." "You can't blame them," was the answer. "They're just like us. They've got to live. Don't blame the man who offers to work cheaper than you and gets your job." "How about the wife and kiddies?" his interlocutor demanded. "There you are," came the answer. "How about the wife and kiddies of a man who works cheaper than you and gets your job, eh? How about his wife and kiddies? He's more interested in them than in yours, and he can't see them starve, so he cuts the price of labor and out you go. But you mustn't blame him, poor devil, he can't help it. Wages almost come down when two men are after the same job. That's the fault of competition, not of the man who cuts the price." "But wages don't come down where there's a union," the objective was made. And there you are again, right on the head. The union checks competition among the laborers, but makes it harder where there are no unions. There's where your cheap labor of Whitechapel comes in. We are unskilled and have no unions, and cut each other's throats, and ours in the bargain, if we don't belong to a strong union. Without going further into the argument, this man on the Mile End Waste pointed the moral that when two men were after the one job, wages were bound to fall. Had he gone deeper into the matter, he would have found that even the union, say 20,000 strong, could not hold up wages if 20,000 idle men were trying to displace the union men. This is admirably instanced just now by the return and disbandment of his soldiers from South Africa. They find themselves by tens of thousands in desperate straits in the army of the unemployed. There is a general decline in wages throughout the land, which, giving rise to labor disputes and strikes, is taken advantage of by the unemployed, who gladly pick up the tools thrown down by the strikers. Sweating, starvation, wages, armies of unemployment, and great numbers of the homeless and shelterless are inevitable when there are more men to do work than there is work for men to do. The men and women I have met upon the streets and in the spikes and packs are not there because, as a mode of life, it may be considered a soft snap. I have sufficiently outlined the hardships there, and I go to demonstrate that their existence is anything but soft. It is a matter of sober calculation here in England that it is softer to work for 20 shillings, $5 a week, and have the regular food and the bed at night than it is to walk the streets. The man who walks the streets suffers more and works harder, for far less return. I have depicted the nights they spend, and how, driven in by physical exhaustion, they go to the casual ward for a rest-up. Nor is the casual ward a soft snap. To pick 4 pounds of oakum, break 1,200 weight of stones, or perform the most revolting tasks in return for the miserable food and shelter they receive is an unqualified extravagance on the part of the men who are guilty of it. On the part of the authorities, it is sheer robbery. They give the men far less for their labor than do the capitalistic employers. The wage for the same amount of labor performed for a private employer would buy them better beds, better food, more good cheer, and, above all, greater freedom. As I say, it is an extravagance for men to patronize a casual ward, and that they know it themselves is shown by the way these men shun it till driven in by physical exhaustion. Then why do they do it? Not because they are discouraged workers. The very opposite is true. They are discouraged vagabonds. In the United States, the tramp is almost invariably a discouraged worker. He finds tramping a softer mode of life than working. But this is not true in England. Here the powers that be do their utmost to discourage the tramp and vagabond, and he is, in all truth, a mightily discouraged creature. He knows that 2 shillings a day, which is only 50 cents, will buy him 3 fair meals, a bed at night, and leave him a couple of pennies for pocket money. He would rather work for those 2 shillings than for the charity of a casual ward, for he knows that he would not have to work so hard and that he would not be so abominably treated. He does not do so, however, because there are more men to do work than there is work for men to do. When there are more men, when there is work to be done, a sifting out process must obtain. In every branch of industry, the less efficient are crowded out, being crowded out because of inefficiency. They cannot go up, that must descend and continue to descend until they reach their proper level, a place in the industrial fabric where they are efficient. It follows, therefore, and it is inexorable, that the less efficient must descend to the very bottom, which is the shambles wherein they perish miserably. A glance at the confirmed inefficients at the bottom demonstrates that they are, as a rule, mental, physical, and moral wrecks. The exceptions to the rule are the late arrivals, who are merely very inefficient, and upon whom the wrecking process is just beginning to operate. All the forces here, it must be remembered, are destructive. The good body, which is there because its brain is not quick and capable, is speedily wrenched and twisted out of shape. The clean mind, which is there because of its weak body, is speedily fooled and contaminated. The mortality is excessive, but even then they die far too lingering deaths. Here, then, we have a construction of the abyss and the shambles. Throughout the whole industrial fabric a constant elimination is going on. The inefficient are weeded out and flung downward. Various things constitute inefficiency. The engineer who is irregular or irresponsible will sink down until he finds his place, say as a casual laborer, an occupation irregular in its very nature and in which there is little or no responsibility. Those who are slow and clumsy, who suffer from weakness of body or mind, or who lack nervous, mental, and physical stamina, must sink down, sometimes rapidly, sometimes step by step to the bottom. Accident by disabling an efficient worker will make him inefficient, and down he must go, and the worker who becomes aged, with falling energy and numbing brain, must begin the frightful descent which knows no stopping place short of the bottom and death. In this last instance, the statistics of London tell a terrible tale. The population of London is 1/7 of the total population of the United Kingdom, and in London, year in and year out, one adult in every 4 dies on public charity, either in the workhouse, the hospital, or the asylum. When the fact that the well-to-do do not end thus is taken into consideration, it becomes manifest that it is the fate of at least 1 in every 3 adult workers to die on public charity. As an illustration of how a good worker may suddenly become inefficient, and what then happens to him, I am tempted to give a case of M. Gary, a man 32 years of age, and an inmate of the workhouse. The extracts are quoted from the annual report of the trade union. I worked at Sullivan's Place in Widnes, better known as the British Alkali Chemical Works. I was working in a shed and had to cross the yard. It was 10 o'clock at night and there was no light about. While crossing the yard, I felt something take hold of my leg and screw it off. I became unconscious. I didn't know what became of me for a day or two. On the following Sunday night, I came to my senses and found myself in the hospital. I asked the nurse what was to do with my legs, and she told me both legs were off. There was a stationary crank in the yard, let into the ground. The hole was 18 inches long, 15 inches deep, and 15 inches wide. The crank revolved in the hole 3 revolutions a minute. There was no fence or covering over the hole. Since my accident, they have stopped it altogether and have covered the hole up with a piece of sheet iron. They gave me £25. They didn't reckon that as compensation. They said it was only for charity's sake. Out of that I paid £9 for a machine by which to wheel myself about. I was labouring at the time I got my legs off. I got 24 shillings a week, rather better pay than the other men because I used to take shifts. When there was heavy work to be done, I used to be picked out to do it. Mr. Menton, the manager, visited me at the hospital several times. When I was getting better, I asked him if he would be able to find me a job. He told me not to trouble myself, as the firm was not cold-hearted. I would be right enough in any case. Mr. Menton stopped coming to see me, and the last time he said he thought of asking the directors to give me a £50 note so I could go home to my friends in Ireland. Poor M. Gary. He received rather better pay than the other men because he was ambitious and took shifts, and when heavy work was to be done he was the man picked out to do it. And then the thing happened and he went into the workhouse. The alternative to the workhouse is to go home to Ireland and burn his friends for the rest of his life. Comment is superfluous. It must be understood that efficiency is not determined by the workers themselves, but is determined by the demand for labor. If 3 men seek one position, the most efficient man will get it. The other 2, no matter how capable they may be, will none be less inefficient. If Germany, Japan, and the United States should capture the entire world market for iron, coal, and textiles, at once the English workers would be thrown idle by hundreds of thousands. Some would emigrate, but the rest would rush their labor into the re-aiming industries. A general shaking up of the workers from top to bottom would result, and when equilibrium had been restored, the number of the inefficient at the bottom of the abyss would have been increased by hundreds of thousands. On the other hand, conditions remaining constant and all the workers doubling their efficiency, there would still be as many inefficients, though each inefficient were twice as capable as he had been and more capable than many of the efficients had previously been. When there are more men to work than there is work for men to do, just as many men are in excess of work will be inefficients, and as inefficients they are doomed to lingering and painful destruction. It should be the aim of future chapters to show, by the work and manner of living, not only how the inefficients are weeded out and destroyed, but to show how inefficients are being constantly and wantonly created by the forces of industrial society as it exists today.